Hello, my name is Niall McKay and welcome to Living with PSC, a podcast about the rare disease of primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, PSC causes the bile ducts inside and outside the liver to become scarred, narrowed and eventually blocked, and leads to liver cirrhosis. In this podcast, we aim to dispel some of the myths about the disease. Today's guest is Dr. Valentina Medici, and she is a gastroenterologist and hepatologist at the University of California at Davis. And today we are going to talk about nutrition and PSC. Dr. Medici, do you want to talk about your area of expertise?
I'm a gastroenterologist and a hepatologist with a special focus on metabolic diseases and rare diseases. And a major interest of mine is nutrition, with particular focus again on nutrition in liver diseases and condition affecting the gastrointestinal tract.
And can you tell us a little bit more about that? Because it's fascinating in terms of nutrition, because certainly in terms of primary sclerosing cholangitis, nutrition obviously is one of the big factors because it's...
The relation between food and nutrients and many diseases that you can think of is obviously very close, but that is particularly true for pretty much any conditions that can affect the gastrointestinal tract or the liver. This has been becoming more and more apparent over the past decade and over the past few years, since we are acquiring more information also about the microbiome and the microbiota, so the intestinal flora that populates our intestine, and how these can affect the overall well-being of an individual, but in particular also the onset and progression of liver disease. So essentially nutrition can significantly be associated to some extent to the onset, to many gastrointestinal conditions and liver diseases, to their progression, and sometimes even to their worsening.
Yeah, well, certainly with PSC, there's, I think the statistic is something like over 80% of PSC patients also have ulcerative colitis, and then a subsection also have Crohn's disease. And as I understand it, as I don't understand it, nobody quite knows what the connection between the two diseases or the three diseases are.
That's correct, yeah. Obviously there is a strong immunological component, and it's hard to tell if really nutrition or food has a role in the etiology, so in the onset of the disease, in the beginning of the disease. And we don't have much evidence of that. However, it is extremely important, the nutritional status of an individual, because poor nutritional status will always be associated with poor outcomes, meaning worse progression and manifestation of the disease itself. So it's something to keep always very much into consideration in the picture.
Well, one of the things we keep running up against here is that, you can't eat yourself well, but you can certainly eat yourself sick.
That it's interesting, yes. I actually think that if you eat properly, and the appropriate nutrients and the appropriate combination of nutrients, that will also help you to keep what is really crucial, the muscle mass. So what it's becoming really crucial for any really patient with liver disease, and that it can affect significantly their survival and mortality. It's important to avoid what it's called sarcopenia, so loss of skeletal muscle mass, and that can be really significantly addressed with appropriate nutrition and exercise.
I see. It seems that there is definitely a relationship between the microbiome and PSC. What are the things you can do to encourage a healthy microbiome?
So the microbiome can really be affected by so many factors. However, generally speaking, for any individual, for example, taking probiotic may be a good start. Yogurt with probiotics, and in general, a diet rich in fibers. It's where to start from. Is this a healthy microbiome? It's fairly vague concept, if you want. So is taking probiotics really affecting, for example, by any mean, the progression of PSC, for example, or other liver diseases? For now, it's somehow hard to tell. But these are the good habits that you can take, and you can follow, even again if you have PSC.
What are the things, harmful foods for your microbiome, and what kind of effect can they have on you?
Okay, so what I think we should avoid in the diet are the saturated fats and refined sugars. Okay, so and in general, animal proteins, so animal origin proteins are what can really affect not only the microbiome, of course, but how we use the energy, for example. Meaning bad sources of fat, fried food, and in general, simple and complex carbohydrates should be avoided. Yes.
And so, conversely, what foods should we gravitate towards if we can?
Sure. In especially, I would say in early stages of we're talking about PSC still, of course.
Yeah.
You want to select more like whole grains, and then sources of favor sources of monounsaturated fats, meaning, for example, avocados. Just to be more specific, avocados, olive oil, olives, nuts, soybeans, and favor also lean proteins. So proteins from plants, essentially. So that would be, for example, puree lentil soup, beans, hummus, so chickpeas, nut butters, or reduced fat cheese or Greek style yogurt, for example. And this really we could make these recommendations to anybody, but in particular, with patients also with even early stages of PSC, these are the things to favor.
Would things like chicken, grilled chicken, or stuff like that, or do you think it's best to stick to the animal or to the vegetable proteins?
In general, well, it's good to have a good intake of proteins, because that what it's really crucial is to maintain the muscle mass. So for PSC patients and anybody else, is plant-based proteins a good choice. However, if other sources of proteins, animal proteins or chicken, turkey, would be much better than red meat, for example.
And how about eggs?
Eggs is also a good source of protein, and obviously there is some fat in there. But for example, one egg a day would be absolutely fine.
Because as you say, you need to keep up your muscle mass and keep eating enough protein to fight the illness and to keep your immune system going. And yet it's sort of hard to eat enough protein in some ways. If you're on a vegetable only based diet, you have to be careful, I think.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, definitely some sort of sources of animal protein that can increase somehow your protein intake. But there are a lot of good options that can keep up your proteins without necessarily choose or had to rely a lot on meat. So I didn't mention seafood, for example, or quinoa, or lean beef obviously can also be an option. So these are the things that will be particularly helpful both in early and advanced stages of liver disease or PSC.
Say I get a big fatty burger from the worst possible fast food joint, you know, um, food, and I eat it. Can you tell me what actually happens then when it sort of hits my stomach? Like, what's the process?
Well, that's a good question. Yes. So what happens is that the fat that you're taking in needs to be absorbed, and it needs to be digested. And to have this breakdown and absorption of fat, to achieve this, the bile and its component will have a major role in this. Okay, so so that's why patients with PSC in particular, so where the bile flow it's reduced, and there is essentially a reduced breakdown and absorption of fat in the intestinal tract. And that what causes fat malabsorption and deficiency, with also problems associated with malabsorption of what we call fat-soluble vitamins, and potential deficiencies of those particularly vitamins. So essentially, yes, when you eat these very rich food, particularly rich in fat, you need the bile flow and the content of the bile to be very active, or to be adequately present in the intestine to guarantee the absorption of digestion and absorption of fat. So the other thing is that we all need some amount of fat in the diet. So eating some fat, good sources of fat, is absolutely necessary. But we also have to be able to digest this fat and absorb it.
The body will produce the bile anyway, won't it? I mean, if you have a big greasy meal, the body will produce the bile, but it may not make it through the liver to help
Correct.
break down the food. So there again, is exasperating the disease because it builds up in the liver and causes more cirrhosis.
Yeah, in some way, potentially, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's and then the other problem is, I think, is that the primary treatment for PSC a lot of the time is antibiotics. Can you talk a little bit about the role of antibiotics in the, well, I guess in the gastrointestinal tract?
Yeah, so there are emerging data that are, not only emerging data, but really a lot of patients are using or are prescribed antibiotic for primary sclerosing cholangitis. Now, I think that the recommendations for PSC are not completely clarified, but there is a clear connection between some improvement of the disease of phenotype and progression with the use of some type of antibiotic. So there is definitely some progress in this. We do have a lot of patients that are using cycle of antibiotics for their condition. So and it's definitely linked to some modification of the microbiome itself. So.
Oh, and this would be the people who take antibiotics all the time, as opposed to people who just take it when they get ill.
Correct.
Yeah, and this is to sort of keep the infection at bay. Is that the thinking?
Yes, so well, there is some evidence where we're talking primarily about, I think, vancomycin, and there is some evidence that it can improve actually the liver numbers, and particularly in patients without cirrhosis. There is also has been showed some improvement to some extent, also the liver histology in some pediatric cases, I think. So yes, so that's what it has been shown.
Are there other things, do you think, nutritionally that we can do, like, are there, things like, kimchi or bitters or stuff like that, or even, um, uh, other herbs and stuff like that that we can, that have a positive effect, or a positive outcome for PSC patients?
So, well, first of all, there are some good habits that you can follow. And, as a gastroenterologist and hepatologist, we're never too excited about herbs or alternative medicine. So, but there are alternative medicine approaches. But there are some strong data that indicate that, for example, eating a snack at bedtime, it can be extremely important in maintaining the muscle mass. So taking that, if that does not conflict with other problems, like, for example, diabetes or obesity, because obviously PSC patients can be overweight like anybody else's. But taking the habit to eat a snack at bedtime will fight or will limit the progression of these sarcopenia, so the skeletal muscle mass loss. So also make sure that fasting time between the last meal that you had at bedtime, at bedtime, and the first meal in the morning is reduced. So meaning have an early morning breakfast with complex carbohydrates and proteins. Again, trying to limit the fasting period. Again, as I was saying, eat your proteins, avoid skipping meals, and have small and frequent meals if it helps you with digestion. So these are really the golden rules that I always give to my patients, and definitely apply to PSC patients. You are asking about other alternative eventually approaches that can be used. Really not much, but there are a couple of things that it can be extremely helpful, and one is coffee. So coffee is good for the liver, and is also good specifically for patients with PSC. So there are very good data showing actually that drinking black coffee, so we're not talking about sugar, caramel and all, but just black coffee, and could be an espresso, for example, is drinking coffee is negatively associated with the onset of PSC. So really very interesting epidemiological data. So drink your coffee 1 or 2 a day if you can. And another thing that may be helpful in that realm of alternative medication, or outside, the traditional medicine, would be the curcumin or turmeric. And that it's considered, it is actually an antioxidant and has anti-fibrosis property. And there are some in vitro study, meaning study that comes from essentially basic research, basic science research. So preclinical data showing that it can help even, again, in PSC, in some model of PSC. So that's, curcumin was part of the traditional culinary, culinary habits of Southern Asia and Indian subcontinent, where it grows naturally. And so it's extremely common there, but it's definitely taken over here. And it has been used for so many applications, but it's something that may be helpful for PSC as well.
And is there a way, I mean, other than injecting it, is there a way to take enough of it that will be helpful?
Um, that we don't know what is the effective amount, and so there is an ongoing clinical trial, which patients can check on the NIH website, which is clinicaltrials.gov, and I think at some point we may know if there is a effective dose, but that is probably one of the challenges, figuring out what is the effective dose.
Is it an anti-inflammatory?
Yes, an antioxidant.
Antioxidant, okay. I think PSC patients have a 20% higher likelihood of getting cholangiocarcinoma. It sounds like for you, it's the two primary things that we're trying to do is stop exacerbating the disease through, you know, triggering large amounts of bile, and to get enough nutrition that we don't start going through any kind of muscle wasting or muscle loss.
That is correct. Yeah, I would say primarily the second that you said. So it is extremely important to eat the appropriate food that will give you adequate proteins and nutrition without causing problems. Like, say, for example, exacerbating diarrhea. Or having a lot of fat in your stool, which can cause bloating and abdominal pain, diarrhea, and being very uncomfortable. Yes, so that's what we have. But at the same time, you need to absorb some fats to make sure that you absorb and have the adequate intake of what we call the fat soluble vitamins. So, like, for example, vitamin D, vitamin A, vitamin E, those fat soluble vitamins that you still need to take in.
And can we talk, just to change gears slightly for a little minute, and can we talk a little bit about cholesterol and PSC? Is that something that you've studied?
Well, this is something that it comes out to be elevated often in patients with problems with cholestasis. So yes, that it's a common situation. Patients sometimes may need to take medication for that.
Like statins or something like that?
Sometimes, yes.
High cholesterol is just as damaging as if you're don't have liver disease. It can affect your heart.
Well, the mechanism can be slightly different than other, known PSC patients. So statins may not be needed, even like sometimes at early stages. But yes, that is something that should be discussed with the doctor, with the hepatologist, or with their doctors.
Yeah, sometimes does urso sometimes helps with that.
Oh, also, yes, that is something that definitely has to be discussed.
Yeah, great. So again, just to recap, let's talk about the foods again, just to recap. So you talked about quinoa, avocados, nuts, I presume like tuna fish or non-hugely fatty forms of fish.
Yes. So regarding try to recapitulate again the healthy fats, let's say, that you can take. Those are the monounsaturated and polyunsaturated fats. So, for example, olive, canola, and peanut oils, avocados, safflower, sesame, soy, nuts, and seeds. And flaxseed, for example, is a good source of omega-3s. Whereas on the other side, you have to try to limit unhealthy fats. So, for example, obviously saturated fats, and that include fatty meat, poultry skin, bacon, sausages, and trans fat. Those are not healthy for sure, like margarine, shortening, and some fried foods.
Is coconut oil a saturated fat?
Oh, actually, coconut oil is pretty rich in what it's other sources of fat that are not bad at all. So that can be a source of good fat that patients can that can use.
So it's sort of, and I know you're from Italy, but it's kind of a Mediterranean diet almost, is that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. It's obviously, yes, it's about the quality and the quantity in the sense that, also having huge amount of olive oil is not necessarily a good thing to have. So it's about both the quality and the quantity. But definitely, it is very close to the if a Mediterranean
Yeah,
diet.
so what supplements do you think can help? Are things like spirulina and stuff like that useful?
No, meaning, so for example, if patients are not able to intake that many proteins, um, it would be a good idea to try to take over-the-counter supplements, meaning like Ensure Plus or Boost Plus. So like to provide additional calories. In case they are overweight, they can take other supplements, like, for example, Glucerna or Boost Glucose Control or Boost VHC at bedtime. So these are just some of the brands that can be purchased over the counter to increase the protein
I
intake.
see. Okay, and juicing in general, do you have an opinion?
No, nothing. Well, juicing, if you do it on your own, it's a good thing to do. So, coming, from, fruits and vegetables that you do on your own, absolutely not against it. If it's a juice that you're buying, always be careful with that, because in general, juices tend to be very rich in sugar as well, and with juices, then you tend to intake a large amount of sugar without even realizing it. So if it's something that you do on your own without adding sugar, that's a great thing to do. Otherwise, be very careful on the sugar content.
And the sugars that we should avoid, or one should avoid, would include any kind of raw sugar, I presume.
Essentially, yes. Yeah, there is really no sugar. Yes, so sure. So, any type of sugar that you want to consider that you normally use, that it's always something in general to try to limit.
And normal breads and cookies or crackers.
No good, of course. Yeah, of course. Whole grains. If you have to have obviously some sort of complex carbohydrates, whole grains for your bread and pasta, it's always the good choice. There is some quinoa, also wild rice, but otherwise, they try to limit other sources of carbohydrates.
Well, thank you very much for your time. This has been hugely helpful, and you've been very gracious and patient with me. So I appreciate that. Maybe I could check in with you again sometime soon.
I will be happy to talk to you again.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Niall.
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have for this week. For more information about PSC and for a list of people and topics we'll be covering in the near future, please go to www.pscpartners.org. That's www.pscpartners.org. PSC Partners is a non-profit organisation dedicated to providing education and support to primary sclerosing cholangitis patients. There is information and resources on the website. There is a conference once a year. There is a private Facebook group that you can also join. Also, please join our patient registry. This is an anonymous database that provides research support to the medical community who are researching this disease. Thank you very much for listening.